Clyde sat on the crumbling balcony of a half-destroyed tower, gazing across the cracked, barren plains that stretched to the horizon. For years, those desolate expanses had been the only view he'd known, yet every time he ventured onto the balcony, he considered it a small act of defiance. To watch the red sun sink below a haze of dust and sand, it reminded him of why he existed: to defend. He gently pressed a bare palm to the metal of his forearm. Though outwardly he looked human, his entire skeletal system had been reconstructed to withstand violent forces. His eyes were sharper, designed to discern the faintest movement in the distant gloom, and his muscles never fatigued. Like every member of the Titan Defenders, Clyde was more machine than man. But only one type of machine truly mattered in this world: the towering war suits known as Titans. A call from behind awakened him from his reverie. The old scuffed metal door creaked open, revealing Talia, another defender. Her dark hair was tied back under a coiled necklace of shimmering black metal, the only accessory that reliably stayed in place when she wore her mech suit. Talia had been genetically engrafted with a specialized neural amplifier that allowed her to control her Titan with pinpoint precision. "It's almost time," she said, voice resonating with quiet urgency. "General Corvin wants us to run a final systems check." Clyde pushed himself to his feet. "Let's not keep the good general waiting." Like all Titan defenders, Talia and Clyde belonged to the genetically engineered ruling class that had emerged centuries after the Blight Wars. Survivors had retreated into sprawling city-states raised from the ruins, each ringed by mammoth scrap walls. These enclosed populations relied on the Titan defenders to keep marauders, mutated beasts, and rival city-states at bay. Now even that precarious hold on existence was beginning to slip. Over the last decade, resource shortages and intensifying territorial clashes had taken their toll. Their home city, Celeren, was far from stable. Clyde trailed Talia down the winding corridor, once part of a towering edifice known as the Archival Spire. Much of it had collapsed over the years, leaving only this precarious section. They ascended a warped metal staircase that rattled with each step. Painted slogans on the walls, encouraging the city's populace to trust in their Titan pilots, were chipped and faded. High overhead, the vaulting skies flickered with electric storms that never quite broke, but always looked ready to unleash fury. Clyde tried to steady his heart. With each moment, the coming conflict weighed heavier upon him. The city's intelligence networks detected a surge in activity from the nomadic raider clans who prowled the wastes. Now, scouts reported their massive war machines were only a half-day's march away. They reached a colossal hangar bay. The weight of the air changed at once, thick with machine oil and molten metal. A rumble of unseen generators vibrated underfoot. Row upon row of Titans stood in metal docking frames, each machine more than 20 meters tall. Some of them were the older Mark IV units, covered in patchwork armor plates. Others were sleeker, more modern prototypes, bristling with arrays of advanced weaponry. "Clyde," Talia greeted General Corvin, arms folded behind his back. His voice held the innate authority of a man who had lived through countless battles. A single gold star pinned to his armor's collar signified his command. "We need to make final checks before tomorrow's sortie. The raider clans are moving. Celeren is counting on our readiness." "Yes, sir," Clyde replied, suppressing a surge of uncertainty. Corvin's gaze lingered on him. The general had always treated him with a mixture of trust and caution. Raised from infancy to be perfect warriors, Titan defenders were known to harbor crippling instincts. It was said that their biology didn't just amplify physical and mental prowess, but also raw emotion. Sometimes, that emotion violently overflowed. "Go to your mechs," Corvin ordered. "Run every test until you're satisfied. Remember, after tomorrow we'll have fewer second chances." Clyde and Talia walked among the Titan suits, each the size of a small building. Clyde's personal Titan, Radian, glinted in the dim overhead lights. Radian's chest plating was carved from a titanium alloy tinted by iridescent white. A stylized sunburst crest, the emblem of Celeren, adorned its left shoulder plate. He climbed the frame's ladder until he reached the cockpit, a tight compartment nestled in the Titan's chest. Arrays of screens, levers, and neural interface modules crowded the interior. Clyde settled into the pilot seat, exhaling slowly as he clicked the harness into place. Tendrils of the neural integration system snaked around the base of his skull, seeking out the ports embedded in his spine. A sharp jolt of recognition snapped through his mind as Radiant came alive. Lights flickered across the interface, and each mechanical limb twitched in readiness. Clyde's field of vision expanded, superimposing the Titan's sensor suite over his own natural sight. He felt the hum of the plasma reactors deep within Radiant's core, thrumming against his augment. The Titan responded to his subtlest thoughts, as though an extension of his own body. Outside, Talia's Titan Dawnpiercer radiated a pale bronze sheen, reflecting her own neural amplifier's signature. Clyde tested Radiant's left arm, flexing the servo joints, verifying that the triple-barreled quick-swap cannon was in working order. Then he checked the right arm, which ended in a segmented gauntlet equipped with an electrified blade. As the final systems check concluded, he could see Talia's Titan walking through its own calibration procedure, each step shaking the hangar's floor. The next morning arrived, draped in a sickly yellow dawn. Over the radio, scattered transmissions poured in, each one announcing escalating tensions, sightings of raider war rigs, calls for reinforcement, urgent pleas from outlying settlements. The city of Celeran had seen plenty of assaults before, but seldom had the raiders convened in such force. Within the steel confines of the Titan hangar, tension crackled in the air. The entire Titan squad readied itself, each defender strapping in, minds merging with the mechanical giants they commanded. Clyde ran one last mental command, and Radiant's main thrusters parted. The hangar's massive doors parted with an echoing groan, and morning light flooded the bay. One by one, the Titans emerged, each pilot feeling the tremor of the ground beneath their Titan's colossal footsteps. They marched through Celeran's outer gate to face the expanse beyond. As far as Clyde's augmented eyesight could detect, the desert shimmered in the early sun. A scattered formation of hills and jagged rocks offered minimal cover. Somewhere, miles beyond the horizon, the raider clans advanced. 9 Titans formed the vanguard. General Corvin's Titan, an onyx-armored behemoth named Harbinger, led them. Harbinger's silhouette bristled with advanced railguns and twin-bladed arms. When Corvin spoke over the shared comlink, his voice was firm as bedrock. Enemy contact is expected 30 clicks due east. We march until we reach the Tri-Spire Dunes, then establish a perimeter. Our scouts will be waiting. They trudged forward, a formidable legion of mechanical saviors. Clyde's heart pounded. The harsh sun glinted off Radiant's plating, and a swirl of hot wind kicked up dust across the Titan's feet. 40 minutes into the march, Talia's voice crackled over the shared comm. I have movement. Extreme range heading in from the southeast. Clyde toggled Radiant's advanced optics to maximum zoom. He glimpsed silhouettes on the horizon, at first just shifting dots in a heat mirage, but soon forming into monstrous shapes of rusted metal, bristling with spikes and artillery. There were at least a dozen such raider rigs, and behind them thundered caravans weighed down by scrounged weaponry. Formation Beta, Corvin commanded. The Titan squad spread into a semicircle, a tactic designed to funnel incoming attackers into a more concentrated kill zone. A war horn bellowed across the plains, and the raider rigs accelerated. Dust swirled behind them as they rumbled forward, each vehicle looking like the twisted nightmare offspring of a tank and a tractor-trailer. The instant they closed to within firing range, half a dozen rocket volleys arced through the sky. Clyde saw them bright against the dusty firmament, bright red streaks trailing smoke. His augmented reflexes fired. He raised Radiant's left arm, and a shimmering energy shield flickered into being. Explosions rocked the area as the rockets impacted the shield or the ground. Clouds of dust and debris clouded Clyde's vision, but Radiant's sensors cut through the haze, revealing shapes still charging forward. Return fire, Corvin barked. The Titans unleashed a devastating volley. Plasma bolts stabbed through the swirling dust, carving molten gouges in the desert floor. Railgun slugs boomed, leaving trails of superheated air. Clyde squeezed his triggers, and Radiant's triple-barreled cannon roared to life, spitting shells into 2 raider rigs. One rig veered off course as its driver tried to escape, but a second volley from Talia's Titan blew apart its front axle, and it careened headlong into a crater. Yet the raiders didn't falter. More rockets and shells rained down. One stray rocket struck the knee joint of the Titan just to Clyde's left, sending it staggering. Its pilot cursed, rerouting power to stabilizers. Another rocket streaked overhead, close enough that Clyde flinched at the shockwave. He pivoted Radian's hips and hammered the ground in a broad arc with bounding plasma grenades, forcing the raider line to scatter. But something bigger loomed behind the war rigs. Every sensor on Radian flared with warning. Clyde's enhanced vision locked on an immense silhouette, a monstrous exoform easily rivaling a Titan in size. It lumbered into view, its shoulders braced with spiked plating, and an array of rotating cannons menaced from each side. Even from this distance, Clyde felt the tremble of the ground with each of its steps. "New contact!" Talia shouted over comms. "They have a Titan-class rig." Corvin's voice remained ice-cold. "Focus fire on that behemoth. Stop it before it closes distance." It was no easy target. The exofarm had thick armor, with massive hydraulic limbs reminiscent of a Titan's, but it was welded in ramshackle patches. It bristled with rotating chain guns that spat out scorching tracer rounds, forcing the Titan squad to adopt evasive maneuvers. Bullets pinged off Radian's plating. The shield generator hummed at the edge of overload as Clyde wrestled to keep from sustaining engine damage. General Corvin led a flanking effort. Harbinger's thrusters roared, launching the Black Titan into a strafing run on the rig's left side. Corvin unleashed a barrage of tandem railgun shots. Sparks erupted against the crude exoframe's armor, but it kept lumbering forward. On the right, Talia and another defender targeted vulnerable joints with pulse beams, seeking a weak spot. Clyde joined the assault, charging Radian forward. He watched overhead as the sky swirled with fumes and rocket contrails. The exoframe's rotating cannons whined, unleashing a fusillade that hammered Radian's shield. Warning lights flickered within the cockpit, and Clyde grit his teeth as the neural interface radiated jolts of pain in tune with the shield's imminent failure. Still, he pressed onward. With a mental command, he activated the Titan's blade gauntlet. Electrical arcs danced along the blade's edge as Radian swung. The exofram twisted at the last second, absorbing part of the blow against a plating slab, but the edge bit deep, carving out a wedge of metal. A violent tremor shot up Radian's arm, almost knocking Clyde unconscious. But he refused to relent. Before the exofarm could counter, Corvin's Harbinger lunged from the flank, twin-blade arms stabbing in. The entire mass of twisted armor convulsed. Talia planted a final pulse beam shot straight into the rig's primary power relay. A cascade of explosions erupted as the exoframe collapsed, sending out shockwaves that rattled teeth and minds alike. An eerie hush fell. The early morning sun had climbed into an oppressive glare, revealing black smoke rising from the remnants of vehicles. While some raiders fled, the Titan squad scanned the horizon, waiting to see if new threats would emerge. Eventually, Corvin's voice came through the comm. "All units, regroup. Let's confirm we've neutralized the immediate threat." Slowly, the squad made their way through the wreckage. The blistering heat had grown more intense, but their suits regulated internal temperature. Clyde watched the battlefield, twisted metal, scorch marks, and craters. Half buried in debris, bodies of raider fighters sprawled in grotesque stillness. He hated looking at them. Genetically enhanced though he was, the sight still churned his stomach. An ending to violence was never truly an end, only the start of a new cycle of vengeance. One of the other pilots radioed in. "Scouts report, the remaining raider forces are retreating northeast. They still have vehicles, but nothing that can stand against us now. Let them run," Corvin responded. "We have a city to guard, and time is not on our side. I want 2 units scouting for further threats. The rest of you, back to Celerin." The journey home was quiet, as though every defender nursed the adrenaline crash and the creeping guilt that often followed it. When they approached Celerin's towering gates, citizens dressed in patch garments and wide-brimmed hats to ward off the sun came out to greet them. Some cheered, raising makeshift banners. Others simply looked relieved, tears glistening in their eyes. Clyde could see the displays of gratitude, but he also saw fear etched into their postures. The city's defenders had managed to beat back the raiders once again, but no one believed this fragile triumph could last forever. Dismounting inside the hangar, Clyde felt his body tremble with the aftershocks of the neural disconnection. Every muscle fiber and nerve in his genetically enhanced physique stood on edge. He extracted himself from Rajian's cockpit, nearly stumbling on the ladder. Talia steadied him, her own face pale with exhaustion. "It gets harder every time," she murmured. He nodded, unable to formulate a reply. Together they made their way to the briefing hall, where Corvin would debrief them all. The enormous metal-lined room still carried the ghosts of previous battles, battered mech trophies, salvage from past victories, and a massive table with projections displaying the city-state territories. Corvin stood at the head of the room, arms behind his back. His eyes, dimmed with years of fighting, swept across the Titan squad. "Today you saved Celerin from another raider incursion," the general began, voice solemn. "The exofam they fielded wasn't a patchwork of common scrap. It matched Mark VI Titan specs in many ways. Means they found or stolen advanced technology. Don't fool yourselves. This was only a skirmish compared to what could come later." Murmurs circulated among the pilots. Several cast worried looks at the holographic projection, which highlighted Celerin amid a sea of potential threats. The desert city-states had always eyed each other warily, but famine and resource scarcity had escalated tensions far beyond suspicion. Any day, they might find themselves fighting not just raiders, but entire nations. Clyde stood near Talia, heart still pounding. He could feel where the neural interface had rubbed the flesh of his spine raw. The Augment Labs insisted that the genetically engineered pilots were the only ones capable of operating Titans at full capacity. It was an honor, but some days it felt more like a curse. He listened as Corvin concluded. "Rest tonight, but keep your suits on standby. We can't predict the next flare-up. You're dismissed." Stepping out of the briefing hall, Clyde became aware of the celebrations echoing inside corridors. A wave of relief had gripped the city. Vendors offered bites of real food from carefully guarded hydroponics projects, and the people embraced one another in tearful gratitude. Clyde could hardly bring himself to accept a stranger's thanks, though he forced a polite stoic nod. It had grown dark by the time he finally retired to the Titan pilot's quarters. The corridors were dimly lit by flickering fluorescent tubes. He found Talia in an empty rec lounge, perched on a metal bench with a small water canister. Her eyes held an unfocused, distant look. Clyde sat beside her. She broke the silence. "Have you ever thought there must be more than just this cycle of war? That maybe we could spend our talents on something else, like rebuilding the world?" Clyde looked at his genetically enhanced hand, flexing his fingers. "I think about it every day. But the only reason Celerin isn't a ruin like so many other dead cities is because we keep fighting. There's no easy fix." She took a long sip of water. "Sometimes I envy normal people, even those who struggle with daily life. They don't carry this burden of piloting living weapons." He understood the weight she spoke of. Every time he stepped into Radian, Clyde felt the unspoken expectations of the entire city on his shoulders. Hailed as saviors, the Titan defenders were simultaneously revered and feared. People whispered about their inhuman capabilities, muscles that never tired, eyes that saw in the dark, bones that could supposedly deflect bullets. Most days, Clyde dreaded the reverence. The lights flickered again, a reminder that the city's power supply was precarious. Talia sighed and got up. "We should try to sleep. The next emergency might come in a few hours, or tomorrow, or the day after. Whenever it does, we'll have to be ready." The next emergency arrived shortly past dawn. The city's perimeter sensors picked up an approaching cloud on the southwestern horizon. At first, watchers feared another raider assault, but the sensor readouts showed a roiling mass of dust and debris, an incoming sandstorm, the fiercest in decades, sweeping across the region. Panic seized the city, as the walls could barely keep out minor storms, let alone the massive superstorm barreling closer. Sirens blared. Celerin citizens scrambled for underground bunkers or the deeper levels of the city's interior. High above, the Titan hangar deck hummed with frantic activity. General Corvin's directives crackled through the intercom. The Titans were to stand guard near key structural points, using their powerful shielding technology to anchor giant storm barriers. The city would attempt to ride out the storm under a protective dome field. powered by a combination of Titan energy shields and the city's backup generators. Clyde felt a new kind of fear now. Fighting raiders was a known quantity, but bracing against a colossal engine of nature was a monstrous gamble. He climbed into Radiant's cockpit, feeling the neural interface sink into place. As soon as the Titan powered up, the entire building rocked with the first howling gust of the storm's outskirts. The hangar doors opened to swirling skies, thick with dust so dense it obscured the sun. Above the city walls, station towers had begun to project the storm barrier. It shimmered across the top of Celeron like a ghostly dome. But it was incomplete. Energy fluctuations danced overhead, pockets of unprotected air swirling with lethal desert wind. Radiant and the other Titans took up positions at designated anchor points. Clyde was assigned to the city's northern boundary. Talia was stationed near the main gate. Their job was to engage each Titan's full shield array and feed power into the barrier's generator. Wind battered Radiant with staggering force as Clyde aligned the Titan's power relay with the city's node. The screech of flying debris clashing against metal was like the wail of banshees. Gradually, the barrier extended outward, sealing the gap overhead. Within minutes, the city was encased under a shimmering energy shell, hammered relentlessly by the swirling maelstrom. For over an hour, the Titans held their positions, pouring power into the barrier. Clyde braced Radiant's legs, ensuring that each buffeting gust didn't topple the suit. The neural feedback was immense, sending jolts of strain across every nerve in Clyde's body. Checking his readouts, he saw the shield's stability dropping as the storm intensified. Stress fractures rippled across the dome, briefly letting in scouring sand. Grit rattled against Radiant's armor. Then a new alert pinged. The southwestern segment of the barrier was losing power faster than expected. Talia's voice rang out over comms. "We've got a major short in the grid. It might collapse here," Corvin radioed in from his vantage point. "All available Titans, reroute optional power to Talia's position. We lose that anchor, the storm tears us open." Clyde's eyes darted across Radiant's controls. His Titan had only so much emergency power to spare, but he couldn't let Talia's section fail. Focusing on the swirling neural interface, he directed Radiant's reserves to reinforce the southwestern node. A wave of exhaustion hit him as the feedback in his mind quivered. The Titan's systems blinked in protest, but the southwestern node stabilized at a dangerous margin. Minutes became an hour, then longer. The ground quaked under unrelenting winds. Buildings near the perimeter groaned, and some corrugated roofing ripped free, flung into the swirling dark. Clyde took shallow breaths, pitting his genetically fortified endurance against raw exhaustion. Alarms blared on his console. He was pushing Radiant's reactor close to meltdown. Over the comm, the labored breathing of other Titan pilots told him they too were on the brink. Suddenly, a great crack split the air. At Talia's position, a section of the barrier flickered violently, exposing the Titan to the full fury of the storm. Dawnpiercer vanished into a swirl of debris and lethal winds. Clyde's heart nearly stopped. He switched to Talia's channel, hearing only static. Seconds seemed to stretch into eternity. Then Talia's voice pushed through the comm, distorted but recognizable. "My Titan's shield generator is compromised. Manual override. I can't hold it. Someone take over anchoring." Clyde had no direct line of sight. The thick swirl of dust blanketed the city's southwestern edge. Helplessness gnawed at him. He rerouted additional power to her node, but Radiant's overheat alarms wailed. One more drop in the southwestern barrier, and Talia and that entire quarter of Celeron might be lost. He heard Corvin barking orders. Another Titan, call sign Pharaoh, was moving to reinforce Talia's location. The moment Pharaoh's routings merged, the southwestern barrier steadied. Still, Dawnpiercer struggled. Clyde closed his eyes, shutting out the environment for a precious second. He fed a slow breath in, exhaled, and channeled his last reserves of mental calm into Radiant's power management. The Titan's reactor stabilized, humming with a harsh but controlled intensity. Step by agonizing step, the barrier solidified. Finally, After countless hours, the crescendo of wind began to taper off. The airborne debris lessened. The swirling blackness gave way to a dull, dusty twilight. As the storm abated, the dome barrier flickered out. The Titans, battered but functional, powered down their shield arrays. Solaran stood largely intact. Buildings were battered, rubble littered the streets, but the city had survived. Clyde allowed himself a breath of relief. He guided Radiant through the dust-choked roads, searching for Talia. He found her Titan kneeling amid decimated scaffolding. Dawnpiercer's body armor was rent in places, and the shield generator in its left shoulder had been torn away by the storm's fury. Through the Titan's external cams, Clyde saw Talia emerge from the cockpit, battered but alive. Her eyes were bloodshot, face streaked with sweat and grime. He opened Radiant's hatch, dropped to the ground, and made his way across the wreckage. She tried to stand, wavered, and he caught her before she fell. "Talia," he murmured, finagling his arm under her shoulder. Her voice was cracked, but relief shone in her eyes. "We did it. The city's still here." He nodded, feeling tears spring against his own dusty lashes. "Yes, we did our duty." They made their way to a group of medics who'd set up a makeshift triage station near a half-collapsed archway. Civilians emerged from shelters, dazed but alive. Though the city was far from unscathed, there were tears of relief and thanks. Clyde found a seat on a stray chunk of concrete, Talia resting beside him. People came to them with handshakes, tearful gratitude, and even the occasional embrace. Amid the devastation, the Titan defenders had once more proven their worth. Each pilot bore scars of the day's trials. Genetic augmentations or not, the burden of protecting Solaran was etched in every line of fatigue on their faces. When General Corvin arrived, he offered a short nod that communicated everything words did not. They had defended the city once more, both from the violence of marauders and the fury of nature. But everything in Solaran's world was finite. Resources, energy, human will. In the shadows of the battered city walls, each inhabitant had to wonder how many times fortune would favor them, and whether there might one day be a future free of endless storms and battles. By nightfall, flickers of torchlight illuminated small gatherings around the city. Citizens passed around baskets of dried fruit in modest celebration, their exhausted smiles shining with a faint sense of hope. In the Titan hangar, the mechs were arranged in neat rows, battered plating waiting for repairs that might never come. The defenders themselves, battered in mind and spirit, clung to the fleeting comfort that for now Solaran still stood. Clyde ventured onto the same crumbling balcony from which he'd so often watched the sun rise. Talia joined him. Through the night haze, they could see the extent of the storm's damage, collapsed buildings and swirling dust in the artificially lit streets. "Even if tomorrow brings another crisis," Talia said softly, "I still believe we're fighting for something better." Clyde nodded, resting his hand on the rusted railing. "One day, maybe we'll build something that no storm can tear down, something that doesn't require us to be who we are right now." She squeezed his hand, her own flesh and bone genetically riveting with hidden strength. He gazed across the broken land, brimming with new determination. If there was a future for Solaran, it would be shaped by their sacrifice, and their hope for a day when Titans wouldn't be needed to hold the darkness at bay. Until that day dawned, Clyde and Talia and all the other Titan defenders stood vigil over the broken cities of the desert, forging light out of the endless dust.